2.5, 3-minute songs, like because we grew up on the Beatles, and the bridges in those songs are very short.
Every legendary frontman has an equally talented guitarist standing beside them, and for Tom Petty, that person was Mike Campbell. For more than 4 decades, Campbell created the guitar parts that became the backbone of countless hit songs. His approach to playing was never about showing off or grabbing attention. Instead, his work was solid, tasteful, and always perfectly placed to serve the music. He understood a fundamental truth about great guitar playing: it should always serve the song rather than the musician's ego. This philosophy came from deep within his artistic values and shaped everything he would create throughout his remarkable career. Campbell's musical education came from obsessive listening during his formative years. He treated records like textbooks, studying them carefully to understand what made certain albums stand the test of time. He soaked up influences from the British invasion, the American Roots revival, and the psychedelic explosion of the 60s and 70s. Every influence he absorbed passed through his hands and emerged as something uniquely his own. The albums he loved most were not just favorites to him, they were blueprints that demonstrated what a guitar could accomplish when played with genuine purpose and soul. Guitarists like Campbell have a special way of hearing music. They notice the spaces between chords, they pay attention to tone choices, and they understand how rhythm and lead parts interact with each other. His favorite albums reveal a player who valued melody over chaotic playing and craftsmanship over disorder. The Yardbirds album from 1966 crackled with raw electricity and captured the band at their most experimental and daring. Jeff Beck was playing guitar, pushing boundaries that nobody even knew existed at that time. Campbell heard pure innovation in every single track. The band successfully mixed blues, rock, and experimental sounds into something completely fresh and original. Beck's playing combined aggression with imagination, using feedback and distortion as actual instruments rather than just effects. His vibrato was distinctive and wacky, and Campbell believed that vibrato really defines a guitarist's personality more than almost anything else. Songs on this record showed Campbell what truly fearless guitar playing sounded like. Beck refused to follow conventional rules. He made his guitar scream, whisper, and explode with emotion. His solos were unpredictable, yet always served a purpose. Campbell deeply admired how Beck managed to balance chaos with control. This album taught him that guitar work could be wild and adventurous without becoming sloppy, and experimental without losing sight of the song itself. What made this record absolutely essential was its spirit of exploration and risk-taking. The Yardbirds were not afraid to fail publicly. They took risks that could have crashed and burned, but instead they soared to new heights. Campbell carried that courage with him into his own playing throughout his career. He learned that sometimes the most memorable and powerful moments come from trying something nobody expected or had heard before. Buffalo Springfield's second album from 1967 represented American rock music finding its authentic voice. The record blended folk, rock, and country into something that felt fresh and honest. Stephen Stills and Neil Young traded guitar parts with a chemistry that seemed almost magical. Campbell carefully studied how two guitarists could work together harmoniously without competing against each other. Each player had space to breathe, to contribute meaningfully, and to shine without overshadowing their partner. The guitar work on tracks throughout the album was intricate but never showy or pretentious. Stills played with precision and power, while Young brought rawness and unpredictability to the mix. Together, they created textures that were rich and deep, demonstrating layers of sound that one guitarist alone could never achieve. Campbell learned from this album that true collaboration makes everyone involved better at what they do, and that two guitars playing in harmony creates something bigger and more meaningful than either could accomplish alone. What struck Campbell most powerfully about this record was the exceptional songwriting. These were not just guitar showcases designed to display technical skill. They were complete, fully formed songs with compelling stories, genuine emotions, and clear purpose. The guitars served those songs perfectly, never distracting from the overall message. Campbell would spend his entire career doing exactly that alongside Tom Petty, understanding deeply that his role was to make the song better rather than to prove how technically skilled he was as a player. Cream's psychedelic blues album from 1967 exploded with vivid color and energy. Eric Clapton's guitar work reached impressive new heights on this record, combining his blues roots with experimental freedom and creativity. Campbell was mesmerized by how Clapton could play complex passages that still felt rooted in genuine emotion rather than just technical exercise. The technique on display was certainly impressive, but it never felt cold or mechanical. Classic tracks from this album featured Clapton's tone, which was thick and creamy, and his solos were both melodic and powerful. He played traditional blues phrases through psychedelic filters, creating sounds that were somehow both familiar and strange at the same time. Campbell studied carefully how Clapton balanced flashy playing with genuine feeling, showing that virtuosity could serve the soul of a song rather than replace it. What made this album particularly important to Campbell was its demonstration of what was possible on the guitar. Clapton proved that a guitarist could be both technically brilliant and emotionally deep at the same time, that you did not have to choose between impressive skill and heartfelt soul. Campbell absorbed that crucial lesson completely, developing his own playing style to be both capable and heartfelt, never sacrificing one quality for the other. The Byrds' country album from 1968 surprised everyone who knew the band. Parran Parsons had joined and pulled them decisively towards Nashville and country music. For Campbell, this album was a genuine revelation about the guitar's incredible versatility. The jangly 12-string sound that defined the Byrds gave way to pedal steel and Telecaster twang. It proved that rock guitarists could explore any musical territory if they approached it with proper respect and understanding. The guitar work throughout was simple but genuinely beautiful. The playing was clean, melodic, and perfectly suited to serve the songs. Campbell loved how the guitars supported the vocals without demanding constant attention or focus. This was not about showing off technical prowess, it was about serving something bigger than yourself, honoring the deep tradition of country music while simultaneously bringing a rock sensibility to the proceedings. What this album taught Campbell was the tremendous value of both restraint and exploration. The Byrds were not afraid to leave their comfort zone completely. They embraced an entirely new style with full commitment. Campbell would later bring country influences into his own work, understanding that truly great guitarists are not limited or constrained by genre boundaries. They go wherever the song needs them to go, following the music rather than forcing it into predetermined boxes.
The Rolling Stones album from 1969 dripped with both darkness and beauty in equal measure. It captured the Stones at their most raw and powerful. Keith Richards' guitar work was loose but somehow locked in, seemingly sloppy but actually perfect. Campbell studied intensely how Richards created riffs that sounded deceptively simple but were actually impossible to improve upon. Every single note was exactly where it needed to be, creating grooves that felt immortal and timeless. Tracks on this album showed Campbell the tremendous power of atmosphere and mood in rock music. Richards did not play with pristine cleanliness. His guitars were dirty, human, and alive with beautiful imperfection. But that rawness was entirely the point of the exercise. It gave the music authenticity and a sense of genuine danger. Campbell learned that excessive polish can sometimes strip away the soul of music, and that roughness can actually be a tremendous virtue. What made this album absolutely essential was its rebellious attitude. The Stones played as if they did not care whether you liked their music or not, but somehow that defiant attitude made listeners love it even more. Richards' rhythm guitar work was the fundamental heartbeat of rock and roll itself. He played simple patterns with swagger and unshakable confidence. Campbell absorbed this crucial lesson about rhythm guitar being just as important as lead work, and possibly even more important to the overall sound of a band. Neil Young's album from 1970 was pure heart and raw emotion. His guitar playing was rough around the edges, sometimes barely in tune, but always devastatingly emotional and honest. Campbell admired tremendously how Young made imperfection not just acceptable, but actually beautiful. His solos were not technically perfect according to any textbook definition, but they were perfectly honest, expressing feelings and emotions that words alone could never capture. Young's guitar tone was raw and biting. His solos wandered and searched restlessly, sometimes finding resolution and sometimes deliberately not finding it. Campbell studied how Young played exactly what he felt in his heart, rather than what was conventionally expected. The guitars on this album were direct extensions of Young's emotions and inner life, not mere displays of technical skill or virtuosity. The Beatles album from 1966 represented the sound of musical boundaries completely dissolving. It showed the Beatles transforming from a simple pop band into genuine sonic explorers and innovators. George Harrison's guitar work evolved dramatically on this record, incorporating Indian influences and studio experimentation techniques. Campbell was fascinated by how Harrison used the guitar in entirely new ways, treating it as one color in a much larger palette rather than always being the main focus of attention. Harrison's guitar work throughout the album was inventive and melodic. His solos were compact and purposeful, never wasting a single note. His creative use of effects and backward guitar techniques showed Campbell that the recording studio itself could be used as an instrument, and that creativity mattered far more than blindly following tradition. Breaking established rules could actually create something genuinely timeless. What made this album absolutely crucial for Campbell was its fearless spirit of innovation and experimentation. The Beatles were not afraid to experiment boldly, to try techniques that nobody had ever attempted before. Harrison played his role perfectly, contributing exactly what each individual song needed. Campbell learned that being a truly great guitarist means knowing precisely when to step forward into the spotlight and when to step back into the arrangement, when to dazzle the listener and when to disappear completely into the overall sound. Bob Dylan's Electric album from 1965 changed everything in rock music. Mike Bloomfield's guitar work on this revolutionary record was fierce and intelligent, mixing blues fire with rock attitude and swagger. Campbell studied carefully how Bloomfield played with urgency and clear purpose. His solos told stories that were as vivid and compelling as Dylan's legendary lyrics. The guitar was not mere background decoration on these tracks. It functioned as a powerful second voice in conversation with the vocals. The opening track featured one of rock music's most iconic guitar parts. Bloomfield's playing was aggressive but remained tasteful, loud but genuinely musical. His tone cut through the mix with undeniable authority. Campbell learned from this album that electric guitar could be literary and intellectual, that rock music could legitimately be considered art without losing any of its essential rawness and power. What made this album absolutely crucial for Campbell was its originality and musical intelligence. Bloomfield understood completely that he was playing alongside a poet, so he made his guitar playing into poetry as well, creating parts that were sharp, surprising, and deeply meaningful. Campbell would spend his entire career doing the same thing with Tom Petty, crafting guitar parts that enhanced the storytelling rather than competing against it for attention. The Kinks album from 1968 was pure English poetry set to music. Dave Davies' guitar work was understated and beautiful, serving his brother Ray Davies' nostalgic songs perfectly. Loved how the guitars on this record were gentle but still effective, creating powerful atmosphere without demanding constant attention. It represented guitar playing as illustration, painting vivid pictures with sound and tone. The guitar parts throughout were simple and melodic. Davies used clean tones and tasteful overdubs to create rich textures and layers. Nothing was aggressive or flashy. Everything supported the mood, the story, and the feeling being conveyed. Campbell studied intently how less could actually be more in music, and how deliberate restraint could be immensely powerful.
The Byrds' debut album from 1965 was where everything started for Mike Campbell personally. Roger McGuinn's magical 12-string Rickenbacker essentially invented folk rock with its distinctive sound. That jangly, chiming sound became the absolute foundation of everything Campbell would eventually do in his own career. McGuinn took Bob Dylan's poetic words and gave them wings, creating a guitar sound that was bright, hopeful, and completely original. Campbell heard his own future clearly in those opening chords. The title track featured guitar work that was genuinely revolutionary for its time. McGuinn's 12-string created a shimmering wall of sound that was rich with harmonics and overtones. It was not aggressive or harsh, it was simply beautiful. Campbell studied how McGuinn used the guitar to create mood and space within the music, how the jangle became just as important as the melody itself. This was guitar playing as atmosphere, as texture, as an essential character in the overall composition. What made this particular album #1 for Campbell was beautifully simple. It showed him exactly what he wanted to do with his entire life. That distinctive Rickenbacker sound became his personal signature, forming the foundation of the Heartbreakers style for decades. McGuinn proved conclusively that guitar could be both powerful and pretty at the same time, that rock music could have genuine beauty without losing any of its edge or excitement. Mike Campbell spent 50 years exploring and expanding what Roger McGuinn started on this record, one jangly chord at a time. Throughout his remarkable career, Mike Campbell never needed to be the loudest or flashiest guitarist on any stage. He just needed to be exactly the right one for every song. These albums taught him that music is fundamentally about serving something much bigger than yourself. It is about finding your unique sound and then using it to lift other people up. Campbell absorbed all these lessons completely and became one of rock music's most essential players. He was not the flashiest guitarist, but he was certainly among the most reliable and tasteful. Looking back at these influential albums, certain themes emerge repeatedly. The importance of restraint appears again and again. Whether it was the understated beauty of the Kinks, the serving the song approach of Buffalo Springfield, or the atmospheric work of the Byrds, Campbell learned that knowing when not to play was just as important as knowing when to play. This restraint never meant holding back or playing timidly. Instead, it meant having the confidence and musical maturity to understand that empty space in music can be just as powerful as the notes themselves. It meant recognizing that a simple, perfectly placed phrase could have more impact than a flurry of complex runs. The concept of collaboration also runs through many of these records. Buffalo Springfield showed him how two guitarists could enhance each other rather than compete. The Beatles demonstrated how a guitarist could be part of a larger creative vision without losing their individual voice. The Stones proved that even seemingly simple rhythm work could be the foundation that holds everything together. Campbell took these lessons into his partnership with Tom Petty, understanding that the best collaborations happen when everyone involved checks their ego at the door and focuses on making the collective work as strong as possible. Innovation and risk-taking represented another crucial thread. The Yardbirds' fearless experimentation, the Beatles' studio wizardry, and Bob Dylan's electric revolution all taught Campbell that progress in music requires courage. It requires being willing to try things that might fail, to push boundaries that others respect too much to challenge, and to trust your instincts even when they lead you into unfamiliar territory. These artists were not reckless, they were calculated risk-takers who understood their craft well enough to know when breaking rules would create something special rather than just creating noise. The balance between technical skill and emotional honesty appears throughout these albums as well. Eric Clapton showed that virtuosity and soul were not opposing forces, but could actually enhance each other. Neil Young demonstrated that technical imperfection could convey more emotion than polished perfection ever could. Keith Richards proved that feel and groove mattered more than precision. Campbell synthesized these seemingly contradictory lessons into his own playing style. He developed impressive technical abilities, but never let technique become an end in itself. His playing always served the emotional content of the song, using whatever technical tools were necessary to convey the feeling he wanted to express. The influence of different genres and styles also shaped Campbell's versatility. The Byrds' country excursion taught him that good music transcends genre boundaries. The blues foundation of Cream and the Stones gave him a deep well to draw from. The folk-rock fusion of Dylan and the Byrds showed him how different traditions could blend into something new. This openness to diverse influences made Campbell an incredibly versatile player who could move seamlessly between different styles without losing his distinctive voice. He could play country-flavored licks, blues-based riffs, jangly folk rock, or psychedelic explorations, always sounding like himself while adapting perfectly to what each song required. Perhaps most importantly, these albums collectively taught Campbell about the long view in music. None of these records were about quick tricks or temporary trends. They were about creating something with lasting value, something that would still sound fresh and relevant decades after their release. This perspective influenced everything Campbell did with the Heartbreakers. He and Tom Petty were never chasing the sound of the moment. They were trying to create music that would endure, that would connect with people on a fundamental level that transcended changing fashions in production or style.
The guitar tones and textures Campbell absorbed from these albums became part of his musical vocabulary. The jangle of the Rickenbacker 12-string, the gritty power of the Stones, the creamy sustain of Clapton, the raw bite of Neil Young. All of these sounds found their way into Campbell's playing in various combinations. He did not simply copy these tones, he internalized them and made them his own, creating a signature sound that was distinctly his while honoring the traditions these albums represented. Campbell's approach to songwriting and arrangement was also deeply influenced by these records. He learned that great guitar parts often come from understanding the song as a whole, rather than just thinking about the guitar part in isolation. He studied how these albums were constructed, how different elements worked together, how dynamics were used to create tension and release, and how arrangements served the songs rather than overwhelming them. This holistic understanding made him not just a great guitar player, but a great musical collaborator who could contribute to every aspect of the creative process. The humility evident in much of Campbell's playing also traces back to these influences. Despite his enormous talent and the iconic status of his work, Campbell remained focused on serving the music rather than promoting himself. This humility was not about lacking confidence. It was about having enough confidence to let the music speak for itself, to trust that doing the right thing for the song would ultimately be more satisfying and more lasting than showing off. The guitarists he admired most on these albums shared this quality. They were confident enough in their abilities that they did not need to prove anything with every solo or riff. These albums showed Campbell what his instrument could accomplish when played with genuine purpose, restraint, and soul. They demonstrated that the guitar could be a voice for poetry, a foundation for groove, a source of atmosphere, a vehicle for emotion, and a tool for innovation. They proved that great guitar playing was not about following a single path, but about having the vision to see multiple possibilities and the skill to execute whatever the music demanded. Campbell spent his career exploring these possibilities, always finding new ways to apply the lessons these albums taught him. The best guitarists understand instinctively when to step back and let the song breathe. They know when to fill space and when to leave it empty, when to play complex passages and when simple ones will be more effective, when to be the focus and when to support from the background.
Mike Campbell mastered that delicate art completely and used it to create music that has touched millions of people across multiple generations. His legacy is not built on flashy solos or technical showmanship, but on decades of consistently perfect choices, of always playing exactly what each song needed, of making Tom Petty songs better without ever overshadowing them. These 10 albums gave him the foundation to build that legacy, teaching him everything he needed to know about what it means to be not just a good guitarist, but a truly great one.